The autumn wind cut through the parking lot of Murphy's Auto Shop like a knife, scattering dead leaves across the cracked asphalt. 3 Harley-Davidsons sat gleaming under the fluorescent lights, their chrome catching the glow of the setting sun. Inside the garage, the sound of wrenches hitting metal echoed through the air, mixing with the distant rumble of traffic on Highway 67. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jake Hammer Rodriguez wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, his weathered face focused on the engine he'd been rebuilding for the past 3 hours. The patch on his leather vest read, Iron Brotherhood MC President. At 52, Jake had hands scarred from 40 years of working on motorcycles and a heart scarred from losses that would have broken lesser men. But his hands were still steady, his resolve still unbreakable. The October air carried the scent of motor oil, autumn leaves, and something else. Change. Jake couldn't have known it then, but his life was about to shift in a way that would remind him why he'd first put on that patch 25 years ago. That's when he heard it. Small footsteps running across gravel, stumbling, then running again, then a voice that would haunt him forever. Please, someone help me. He locked my baby brother outside. If you believe that real strength comes from protecting the innocent, that brotherhood means standing up when no one else will, then pause for a moment and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because what happened next proves that sometimes the roughest hands carry the gentlest hearts, and sometimes the angels we pray for wear leather and ride steel horses. Jake looked up from the engine to see a little girl standing in the doorway of his garage. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, her blonde hair tangled and matted, tear-stained cheeks red from crying and cold. She wore a thin pink sweater with holes in the elbows that offered no protection against the October chill, and her small hands were shaking uncontrollably. Behind him, his brothers Tommy Wrench Sullivan and Marcus Bear Williams stopped what they were doing. Tommy, a 4-5-year-old former Marine with gentle eyes hidden behind wire-rimmed glasses, set down the carburetor he'd been cleaning. Bear, whose 6'4" frame and full beard made him look like a mountain man, slowly straightened from where he'd been organizing tools. The 3 men had been riding together for 15 years. Through bar fights and breakdowns, through loss and brotherhood. They'd served together in different ways. Jake had done 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat engineer. Tommy had been a Marine medic in Iraq, and Bear had spent 20 years as a paramedic before a back injury forced him into early retirement. But none of them, despite all they'd seen in war and emergency rooms, had ever witnessed a child look so utterly terrified. Hey there, little one, Jake said softly, setting down his tools with deliberate care. His voice, usually commanding enough to quiet a room full of bikers, became as gentle as a whisper. What's wrong? The girl's lip trembled as she fought back fresh tears. Her whole body was shaking now, and Jake realized it wasn't just from the cold. My baby brother, she began, then stopped, looking over her shoulder as if afraid someone might be following her. Danny's only 2 years old, and Rick locked him outside. He's been out there for an hour, and it's getting dark, and Danny's crying, and Mama's at work, and I don't know what to do. The words tumbled out in a rush, each one hitting Jake like a physical blow. He glanced at Tommy and Bear, seeing his own anger reflected in their faces, but also something else, recognition. All 3 men had been that scared. Child once, in different ways, in different times. Where's outside, sweetheart? Jake asked, crouching down to her level, so she wouldn't have to crane her neck to look at him. Where's your house? The blue trailer on Sycamore Street. The one with the broken fence and the dead flowers in the front yard. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving clean tracks through the dirt on her face. Rick said if I told anyone, he'd hurt Danny worse. But Danny's just a baby. He doesn't understand why he can't come inside. He keeps crying for Mama, and he's so little, and his hands are probably turning blue like mine did last week when Rick made me stay outside. Bear stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the garage floor. Despite his intimidating size, His voice was gentle as a lullaby. "What's your name, little girl?" "Emma," she hiccuped, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Emma Patterson. And my brother's Danny. He's the best baby in the whole world." He laughs when I make funny faces, and he tries to say my name, but it comes out MM, and he gives the best hugs. Rick says he's too loud, says he's not even his real kid anyway. Jake felt something cold and dangerous settle in his stomach. Stepfather, a man who should have been protecting these children, was instead terrorizing them. Jake's own daughter, Sarah, had been about Emma's age when she died. She'd run to him when she was scared, climbed into his lap when thunder scared her, trusted him to keep the monsters away. But who did Emma run to when the monster lived in her house? "Emma," Jake said carefully, his training as both a soldier and a father kicking in. "How long has Rick been doing things like this?" The little girl's eyes darted away, focusing on a grease stain on the concrete floor. "Since Mama married him last year. He was nice at first. He brought me a stuffed elephant for my birthday, and he taught Danny how to stack blocks. But then," she trailed off, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Tommy, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His own childhood had been marked by similar fear, a stepfather who drank too much and had fists like hammers. "Emma, is your mama at work right now?" "She works the night shift at Regional Hospital. She's a nurse, and she says sick people need her." Emma's voice held a mixture of pride and sadness. "She won't be home until 7 in the morning. She leaves at 5:30 every day, and that's when Rick changes." Jake checked his watch. 6:30 p.m. A 2-year-old had been locked outside for nearly 3 hours in 40-degree weather as darkness fell over their small Tennessee town. "Emma, honey, we're going to help you and Danny. I promise you that." Jake stood up and reached for his leather jacket, the one with patches that told the story of his life. "But I need you to tell me the truth. Has Rick ever hurt you or Danny before?" Emma's silence was answer enough. She wrapped her thin arms around herself and nodded slowly, then pulled up her sleeve to reveal finger-shaped bruises on her upper arm. "He grabbed me real hard last week when I spilled juice on his newspaper. And he shook Danny when Danny wouldn't stop crying because he was hungry. Danny's head went back and forth, and his eyes got all scared." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "He says if we tell Mama, she'll stop loving us because she loves him more now. He says Mama chose him over us." Emma looked up at Jake with eyes far too old for her 7-year-old face. "But I don't care if Mama stops loving me. I just want Danny to be safe and warm. I just want him to stop crying." That's when Jake Rodriguez, president of the Iron Brotherhood MC, made a decision that would change 2 young lives forever. He wasn't just looking at a scared little girl anymore. He was looking at his own daughter, Sarah, who had died in a car accident 3 years ago at age 8. Sarah, who would never again run to him for protection, would never again trust him to chase away the monsters. But Emma could. Emma and Danny could. Jake knelt down again and gently placed his scarred hands on Emma's small shoulders. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. What Rick is doing is wrong. It's not your fault. It's not Danny's fault. And your mama would never stop loving you for telling the truth. Do you understand me?" Emma nodded, tears flowing freely now. "Good. Now I'm going to call my brothers, and we're going to go get Danny. We're going to make sure he's safe, and we're going to make sure Rick never hurts either of you again. But first, I need you to be very brave and tell me everything you can about Rick. Can you do that?" Jake pulled out his phone and pressed a number he knew by heart. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Roadhouse here. Church, now. All available brothers to Murphy's Auto. Code Red." In biker terms, Code Red meant one thing. A child was in immediate danger. "How many we talking about, Hammer?" "Bring everyone. This is bad road." Within 10 minutes, the sound of motorcycles filled the air. 7 more members of the Iron Brotherhood roared into the parking lot, engines rumbling like thunder. These weren't young hotshots looking for trouble. These were seasoned men, most over 40, most with families of their own, most with military or law enforcement backgrounds. First through the door was David Roadhouse Thompson, the club's vice president and a retired police detective. Behind him came Miguel St. Santos, a soft-spoken former Army chaplain who ran a youth center downtown. Then came the others, Doc Martinez, a retired paramedic, Stone Williams, Bear's younger brother and a current firefighter, Preacher Johnson, who actually was a preacher at the Baptist church on Sundays, Tank Wilson, a former Navy SEAL who now taught self-defense classes to women, and Wolf Anderson, the youngest at 38, who worked as a social worker for the county. Emma had pressed herself against the wall, overwhelmed by the sudden arrival of so many large, intimidating men. But Jake noticed something remarkable. Despite their size, their leather, their tattoos, every single one of these men immediately softened their demeanor when they saw her. "Brothers," Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Meet Emma. Emma, these are my brothers. They're here to help." Doc Martinez, whose graying beard and kind eyes made him look like a grandfather, crouched down with a first aid kit. "Hi, Emma. I'm Doc. Can I take a look at those bruises? I just want to make sure you're okay." While Doc gently examined Emma's arm, Jake filled in the others on the situation. With each detail, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. These were men who had seen combat, who had worked in emergency services, who had dealt with the worst humanity had to offer. But nothing stirred their protective instincts quite like a child in danger. "Sycamore Street," Wolf said grimly. "I know that area. Been called out there before for domestic disturbances. Always the same story, neighbors hear screaming, we show up, everyone denies anything happened. 2-year-old locked outside for 3 hours," Stone repeated, his firefighter's training making him acutely aware of hypothermia risks. In this weather, that kid could be in serious medical distress. Roadhouse pulled Jake aside. "Hammer, we do this wrong, we could make it worse for these kids. We need to be smart about this." "I know," Jake replied, "but we can't wait for the system. That baby has been outside for 3 hours, Road. 3 hours." Saint approached Emma, who had finished with Doc's examination. "Emma, honey, you said Danny's been crying. When you left, was he still making noise, or had he gotten quiet?" Emma's face went pale. He got really quiet about 20 minutes before I came here. I was watching from my bedroom window, and he just stopped crying and sat down in the dirt." Doc and Stone exchanged a look. Hypothermia. When children got too cold, they often stopped crying and became lethargic. It was a dangerous sign. "That's it," Jake said. "We move now. Wolf, you call Children's Services and tell them we have a situation. Give them the address. Roadhouse, you call your contacts at the sheriff's department. I want law enforcement en route, but not there before we are. And if Rick tries to stop us," Tank asked, his SEAL training evident in how he automatically began assessing tactical approaches. Jake's expression hardened. "Then Rick learns what happens when you mess with children in a town protected by the Iron Brotherhood." 10 Harley-Davidsons rolled through the streets of their small Tennessee town like a thunderstorm made of chrome and steel. Emma rode with Jake, wrapped in Bear's extra jacket, her small arms clutched tightly around Jake's waist. She had stopped crying, but Jake could feel her shaking against his back. As they rode, Jake's mind wandered to Sarah. His daughter had been 8 when the drunk driver ran the red light. 8 years old, on her way home from school, excited to show him a drawing she'd made of their family. In the drawing, Jake had been wearing his Iron Brotherhood vest, and Sarah had drawn herself sitting on his motorcycle. She'd written, "My Hero Daddy," in purple crayon across the top. Jake had that drawing framed in his house, but he'd never been able to look at it without feeling like he'd failed her. He hadn't been there when she needed him most. He couldn't protect her from that drunk driver, couldn't save her from the impact that took her away in an instant. But maybe, just maybe, he could protect Emma and Danny. The blue trailer on Sycamore Street was everything Emma had described and worse. The broken fence was held together with duct tape and hope. Dead flowers hung from plastic planters, and trash scattered the small yard. The trailer itself was old, with rust stains. running down its sides and several windows covered with plastic sheeting instead of glass. But it was what they saw in the backyard that made 10 hardened bikers' blood run cold. A tiny figure sat motionless in the dirt, no longer crying, no longer moving. Danny was still outside. Jake killed his engine and was off his bike before it had fully stopped. Emma scrambled down after him, and together they ran toward the backyard where Danny sat in the cold dirt, wearing nothing but a t-shirt and diaper. "Danny!" Emma cried, but the little boy didn't respond. His lips had a blue tinge, and his small body was shivering uncontrollably. Doc was there in seconds, his paramedic training taking over. He scooped Danny up and immediately began checking his vital signs, while Bear wrapped them both in a thick blanket from his saddlebags. "Severe hypothermia," Doc said grimly. "We need to get him warm, but slowly. Too fast, and we could send him into shock." That's when the trailer's back door slammed open, and Rick Donovan stumbled out. He was exactly what Jake had expected. Mid-30s, beer gut, stained wife-beater shirt, and the kind of swagger that came from bullying people smaller than himself. "What the hell is this?" Rick slurred, obviously drunk. "Get off my property, and get your hands off that brat." 10 members of the Iron Brotherhood turned to face him. 10 men who had served their country, protected their communities, and dedicated their lives to standing between predators and prey. The collective weight of their stare would have made a smarter man back down immediately. Rick was not a smarter man. "I said get out," he yelled, swaying slightly. That kid needed to learn some discipline. Kids these days are too soft. Jake stepped forward, and something in his movement made Rick take an involuntary step backward. Jake's voice, when he spoke, was deadly calm. "Rick Donovan, I presume. My name is Jake Rodriguez. These are my brothers. We're here about Danny and Emma. I don't give a damn who you are. This is my house, my family, and you have no right, your family?" Jake interrupted, his voice still eerily calm. "Rick, let me explain something to you. That little boy you locked outside for 3 hours? He's not your property. He's a human being. A baby who needed protection, not punishment." Rick's face flushed red with anger and alcohol. "Listen here, you leather-wearing freak. I don't need parenting advice from some biker scum. These kids needed to learn respect." "Respect?" Saint stepped forward, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by something much more dangerous. "You think terrorizing children teaches respect?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The 2-year-old was being loud. Rick sneered. "Wouldn't shut up. I gave him some quiet time outside to think about it. 2-year-olds can't think about consequences, you." Ignorant piece of bear started, but Jake held up a hand. "Rick," Jake said, his voice still conversational. "I want you to look around. Really look. See these men standing here? We've got 2 paramedics, a firefighter, a social worker, a retired police detective, a minister, and 3 combat veterans. Every single one of us has dedicated our lives to protecting people who can't protect themselves." Rick glanced around, and for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Now," Jake continued, "I want you to look at that little boy in Doc's arms. Really look at him. See how his lips are blue? See how he's not responding normally? That's hypothermia, Rick. You nearly killed a baby today." "I didn't," Rick started. "You didn't mean to?" Roadhouse interrupted, his detective instincts analyzing every word. "You locked a 2-year-old outside for 3 hours in 40-degree weather. What exactly did you think would happen?" That's when Emma stepped out from behind Jake. Despite everything she'd been through, despite her fear, this 7-year-old girl found the courage to speak. "He knew," she said, her small voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "He knew Danny would get cold. He laughed when Danny started crying. He said maybe next time Danny would be quieter." The silence that followed was absolute. 10 bikers stared at Rick Donovan with expressions that would have melted steel. Tank, the former SEAL, spoke first. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Rick, I've been in combat zones where grown men, trained soldiers, couldn't survive conditions like you put that baby through. And you did it on purpose. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder. Sheriff's deputies, an ambulance, and a children's services van were all approaching. Wolf's calls had been effective. You call the cops? Rick snarled, some of his bravado returning. I'll tell them you threatened me. I'll say you tried to break into my house. Roadhouse smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Rick, I am the cops. Retired Detective David Thompson, 25 years with the Sheriff's Department. And everything that's happened here tonight has been perfectly legal. Citizens have the right to rescue a child in immediate danger, Wolf added, his social worker credentials giving weight to his words. And, brother, you put that baby in immediate danger. Doc looked up from where he was treating Danny. I need to get him to the hospital. His core temperature is dangerously low. Take my truck, Stone said, already moving toward his vehicle. I'll drive. You keep working on him. As Doc and Stone loaded Danny into the truck, Emma tugged on Jake's vest. Is Danny going to be okay? Jake knelt down to her level. Doc is the best there is, sweetheart. Danny's going to be fine. And you know what? You saved him. You were brave enough to ask for help when no one else would. The sheriff's deputies arrived just as Rick made one final, catastrophic mistake. As Emma hugged Jake, thanking him for helping her brother, Rick lost whatever was left of his self-control. Get your hands off her, he screamed, lunging toward Emma. She's mine. They're both mine. He never made it within 5 feet of the little girl. Bear and Tank intercepted him so smoothly, it looked choreographed. One moment Rick was charging forward. The next he was face down in the dirt with his hands secured behind his back. Assault, Roadhouse observed clinically as the deputies approached. Multiple witnesses. On top of the child endangerment, neglect, and domestic violence charges. Deputy Sarah Martinez, who knew the Iron Brotherhood's reputation for community service, surveyed the scene. What happened here, Jake? Jake gave her a complete, factual account of the evening's events while Emma sat on Saint's motorcycle, wrapped in a warm jacket and eating a candy bar that Preacher had produced from somewhere. The girl came to us for help, Jake concluded. We found the boy in hypothermic distress and called for backup. Mr. Donovan has been hostile and uncooperative throughout. Deputy Martinez looked at Rick, who was now sitting in the back of a patrol car screaming about his rights. Then she looked at Emma, who was finally smiling as Wolf showed her pictures on his phone of therapy dogs he worked with at the children's center. Jake, she said quietly, off the record, that little girl is lucky she found you. 3 hours later, Jake sat in the hospital waiting room with Emma curled up asleep in the chair next to him. Danny was stable, his body temperature returning to normal, and the doctors said he would make a full recovery. Emma's mother, Linda Patterson, had been called home from work and was currently with her son. The rest of the Iron Brotherhood had dispersed, but not before making some phone calls. By morning, Rick Donovan would be facing charges of child endangerment, domestic violence, and assault. His bail would be set high enough that he wouldn't be getting out anytime soon. More importantly, Wolf had worked his contacts in children's services. Instead of the children being placed in emergency foster care while their mother worked, a temporary arrangement had been made. Linda could work her shifts, and volunteer members of the Iron Brotherhood would take turns staying with Emma and Danny. It wasn't standard procedure, but given the circumstances and the club's sterling reputation in the community, exceptions were being made. Linda Patterson emerged from Danny's room, tears streaming down her face. She was a small woman, probably in her late 20s, with kind eyes and the exhausted look of someone trying to hold the world together by herself. Mr. Rodriguez? She said tentatively. Jake stood up. Call me Jake, ma'am. I don't know how to thank you. Her voice broke. I had no idea Rick was. I never thought he would. Danny could have died. Jake's expression softened. Linda, you're not responsible for what Rick did. You were working, trying to provide for your children. Rick made his choices. But I brought him into their lives. She whispered. I thought Emma and Danny needed a father figure. I thought I was doing the right thing. Emma stirred in her chair and looked up at her mother. Mama, is Danny okay? Linda knelt down and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. Danny's going to be fine, baby. Thanks to you. You were so brave, Emma. So brave. I found the bikers, Mama. Just like in your stories. Jake looked confused, and Linda smiled through her tears. When Emma was little, maybe 4 or 5, she was afraid of motorcycles. The noise scared her. So I told her stories about how bikers were actually guardian angels who rode loud motorcycles, so people would know help was coming. I never thought. Sometimes kids know things adults forget, Saint said, appearing in the doorway. They know the difference between someone who looks dangerous and someone who is dangerous. Over the next 2 weeks, something beautiful happened. The Iron Brotherhood became part of Emma and Danny's extended family. Bear taught Emma how to change a tire. Doc showed her how to wrap bandages. Wolf brought therapy dogs to visit, and Danny squealed with delight every time the golden retriever puppy licked his face. Jake found himself looking forward to his shifts watching the children. Emma reminded him so much of Sarah, but instead of pain, the similarity brought him peace. He was protecting someone again. He was being the hero Sarah had always believed him to be. 2 months after that October night, Jake stood in his garage, working on a motorcycle engine. But this time, he wasn't alone. Emma sat on a nearby stool, carefully sorting bolts by size while Danny played with toy cars on a blanket spread across the floor. "Jake?" Emma said, using the name she'd started calling him after he told her she didn't need to be so formal. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are you my daddy now?" Jake's hand stilled on the wrench he was holding. The question hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. "What do you mean, Emma?" "Well," she said with the serious expression of a child working through complex emotions, "you take care of me and Danny when Mama's at work. You fix my bike when it breaks. You read me stories. You make me feel safe. That's what daddies do, right?" Jake set down his tools and lifted Emma onto his lap, something that had become natural over the past 2 months. "Emma, I'm not your daddy. Your daddy is someone special who loves you, even if he can't be here right now. But I am something else." "What?" "I'm your guardian angel who rides a motorcycle." Emma giggled. "That's what Mama used to tell me. Your mama is a very smart woman." Danny, hearing his sister laugh, toddled over and held up his arms to be picked up. Jake lifted him too, and for a moment, he held both children close. 3 years ago, Jake had thought his chance to be a father had died with Sarah. He thought the protective, nurturing part of his soul had been buried in that small coffin. But Emma and Danny had shown him something he'd forgotten. Families aren't always about blood. Sometimes they're about choice. Sometimes they're about standing up when standing up matters most. 6 months later, Jake's phone rang during Sunday dinner at the Patterson house. It had become a tradition every Sunday. The Iron Brotherhood gathered at Linda's house for a potluck meal. Linda cooked. The bikers brought side dishes. Tank made surprisingly good potato salad. And Emma and Danny had more uncles than any children in Tennessee. "Jake," the voice on the phone said, "this is Deputy Martinez. We've got a situation. Little boy at Grayson Park. Looks like he's been abandoned. He's asking for his sister, and he keeps saying something about bikers helping kids." Jake looked around the table at his chosen family. Emma was showing Wolf a drawing she'd made of all the Iron Brotherhood members. Danny was sitting in Bear's lap, trying to eat mashed potatoes with his hands. Linda was laughing at something Saint had said about his latest sermon. "We'll be right there," Jake said. 15 minutes later, 10 motorcycles pulled into Grayson Park. A small boy, maybe 5 years old, sat on a bench with a social worker trying to console him. When he heard the rumble of the Harleys, he looked up with hope in his eyes. "Are you the bikers who save kids?" he asked Jake. Jake knelt down to the boy's level, just as he had with Emma that October night. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler. My sister Emma told me about you. She said if I was ever scared and needed help, I should find the bikers with the patches that have the eagle on them." Jake's heart stopped. "Emma? Emma Patterson?" The boy nodded. "She's my half-sister. Different moms. But she said you saved her and her baby brother Danny. She said you'd save me too." Jake looked up at Roadhouse, who was already on his phone. In the background, he could hear Wolf talking to the social worker about temporary placement options. But Jake already knew where Tyler would be staying tonight. 1 year later, Jake stood at Sarah's grave on a crisp October morning. He came here every year on the anniversary of her death, but this time was different. This time, he wasn't alone. Emma held his left hand, Tyler held his right, and Danny sat on his shoulders, playing with Jake's hair. Behind them, Linda stood with several other Iron Brotherhood families. Over the past year, word had spread about the bikers who protected children. They'd been called to help with 3 more situations, and their informal network of guardian angels had grown into something remarkable. "Tell me about Sarah again," Emma said softly. Jake knelt down and traced his daughter's name on the headstone. "Sarah was 8 years old, just a little older than you are now. She loved to draw, and she loved motorcycles. And she believed that her daddy could fix anything that was broken. Could you?" Tyler asked. "I thought I couldn't anymore after she died," Jake admitted. "I thought I was broken too, and that I couldn't fix anything ever again. But you fixed us," Emma said simply. Jake looked at these 3 children who had stumbled into his life and somehow put back together pieces of his heart he'd thought were lost forever. "No, sweetheart," he said, pulling all 3 of them close. "You fixed me." As they walked back toward the motorcycles, Danny riding on Jake's shoulders and Emma and Tyler racing ahead to see who could reach Bear's bike first, Jake felt Sarah's presence. Not the painful absence he carried for years, but something warm and comforting. He thought he could almost hear her voice on the wind. "You did good, Daddy. You saved them all." The Iron Brotherhood had started as a group of men who rode together, worked together, and watched each other's backs. But they'd become something more. They'd become a family that grew every time someone needed protection. Every time a child needed saving. Every time the world proved that sometimes the roughest hands really do carry the gentlest hearts. And on quiet Sunday afternoons, when the garage was full of laughter and the sound of children playing, Jake Rodriguez understood something he'd never realized before. Being a father wasn't something that ended with death. It was something that expanded with love. Sometimes the angels we pray for wear leather and ride motorcycles. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they decide to stay. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that real strength comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves, then please like this video and share it with someone who needs to believe in guardian angels. Comment below and tell us, have you ever experienced unexpected kindness from someone the world might judge too quickly? Because sometimes the people who look the most dangerous are the ones willing to risk everything to keep us safe. And remember, brotherhood isn't about the patch you wear or the bike you ride. It's about the children you protect, the families you defend, and the love you choose to share with a world that desperately needs more guardian angels. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of chosen family, unexpected heroes, and the kind of love that transforms both the protector and the protected. Because every week, we share stories that prove humanity is worth believing in. Thank you for riding with us tonight. Until next time, keep your eyes open for angels in leather. And remember, the best families aren't always the ones we're born into. Sometimes, they're the ones brave enough to choose us when we need them most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.